Geraint Davies from Forever Night, and Harlan Ellison. Now, one is a commentator, the other's a vampire. And we here at The Buzz want you to tell us which is which. This week on The Buzz, we check out how computer digital effects have revolutionized Hollywood. Commentator Harlan Ellison holds forth. Activision takes its popular video game Pitfall to new heights. And the classy actor behind those nasty fangs on TV's Forever Night, Geraint Davies.
This is what he is. Look at him. This is what I've become.
I like blood myself. Yeah.
No, I've got to agree with Harlan Ellison on this one. Hi, Buzzers, come on into this argument here. I'm not into vampires either. I mean, think of the stories about vampires. After that blood-sucking stops, I mean, the story's basically over.
Mike, you've got to admit, vampires are so hot right now, whether you like them or not. Look at the Anne Rice novel.
Yeah.
Coppola's Dracula. The Pitt Cruz movie.
Oh, Brad Pitt, sexiest man alive.
And all these vampire fans are making another young actor very popular, Geraint Davies of Forever Night.
But if he wasn't playing a vampire, would you like him?
Mike, I would like this guy doing anything.
You cannot be in love. You have not one shred of humanity left in you.
Forever Night's bloodthirsty cop, Nick Knight, is the coolest 800-year-old vampire to hit the airwaves in a long time. We had the privilege to chat with Geraint Davies, the charming Welsh-born actor who portrays Nick. And he was eager to tell us why the show is reshaping audience conceptions of age-old vampire lore.
I think what we have is we've got so much sort of positive energy going into the show. It doesn't matter if we actually read every novel ever written on a vampire. It is the sort of joie de vivre that we bring to the show. Much better than having a bunch of dour, serious individuals talking about every nuance that a vampire would bring to the... first of all, I couldn't do the show. I'd have to hide underneath a rock until everybody passed over or something.
Davies' character is a modern vampire who bears more resemblance to the angst-ridden night dwellers in an Anne Rice novel than the creepy count of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I do not love this woman, and prove it to me. Bring her over.
The time and budget constraints of weekly TV has meant Nick's transformation to vampire must be kept simple. There's no laborious hair and makeup job, no widow's peak or facial prosthetics, just some suitably sharp fangs and a $5,000 pair of contact lenses.
Those lenses are amazing because they cover your whole eye, they suck the oxygen out of your eye, you can't see anything, so any action is quite hysterical. Before someone yells cut, I could walk into a door or trip over a table. I've run into the camera before. Ow!
Another pain in the neck of shooting Forever Night is that everything happens at night.
It's the night shoot. It's the 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon till 5 or 6 in the morning thing. It's ugly. You can never get back on track. However, it does make the doing of a vampire show somehow more real. I mean, we're all out there, normal people who have started the show at the beginning of the week, at the end of a week, suddenly become really, really baggy. And they say, why aren't you looking good on this episode? Because I haven't slept.
Nick Knight is an immortal, desperately seeking mortality by atoning for his past sins. That's pretty solemn stuff when stacked up against the cute sitcoms that dominate TV. But Davies says the atmosphere on the set is anything but serious.
We giggle a lot. I mean, you come at someone full vamp and you say something, which my favorite line that I always say is, you cling to your paganism like lichen to a stone. Well, occasionally, yeah, even the best, even the most concentrated individual is going to see those little teeth wiggle, those little contacts in your eyes with that line coming out and spew. And so we often are resetting up shots due to the inability of an actor to say it with a straight face.
Having just completed production, Davies is waiting to hear if the show will be picked up for another season in syndication. Seems this actor isn't ready to toss out the teeth just yet.
The time that I'd really stop doing this is if I had to go open a mall wearing a cape and the teeth and things. I think I'd have to just basically rethink this career plan or path that I have.
From Tron to Gump, computer-generated effects have radically changed the movies. And author team Sprague and Decamp next. When he addressed some visual effects and computer graphics designers about a year ago, novelist Ray Bradbury called a Steven Spielberg movie half-Jurassic Park because he thought the dinosaurs were more compelling than the human characters. I have to agree with him on that. But a lot of people in our audience think that special effects are great just because they're fun. And so our staff here decided to delve into the history of digital effects, and here's what they found. Way back when, almost before mankind inhabited the Earth, special effects looked something like this. The stop-motion effects of King Kong were, of course, pretty amazing for their time. And while special effects continued to evolve in films like Jason and the Argonauts, producers, directors, and the studios felt their creative possibilities were limited. They wanted an effects technology that would allow them to contrive anything and everything for the screen. The solution arrived with the development of computer-generated special effects. In 1982, the digital effects era was ushered in with the Disney-released motion picture Tron.
Who's that guy?
Perhaps it's only fitting that the Walt Disney Company, which of course broke ground with their classic animation work, would be the first film studio to release a full-fledged computer effects film. Appropriately enough, Tron's storyline centered on a human who is sucked into a computer. And it's here in this high-tech world that Tron becomes such a visual feast.
Oh man, this isn't happening. It only thinks it's happening.
The effects wizards weren't satisfied with just creating computer animation for a film about computers. They immediately took up the challenge of creating digital effects for a film set in the physical world. Enter 1984's The Last Starfighter. Filming standard spaceship models was now a thing of the past. For the first time, computers generated a whole new universe filled with spacecrafts, asteroids, and galactical battles. A year later, digital effects took on an even more dynamic look in the Steven Spielberg-produced movie Young Sherlock Holmes. While this film didn't have as many special effects as The Last Starfighter, classic scenes like this one certainly made audiences sit up and take notice. Remember Lon Chaney Jr.'s magical metamorphosis in The Wolfman? Well, digital effects put their own spin on such transformations with a process known as morphing, taking one image and molding it into another. Many people may remember their first morphing experience as occurring in The Abyss, but actually the first screen morph happened a year earlier in 1988's Willow. Then in 1991, the art of morphing fully blossomed when Arnold Schwarzenegger's cyborg enemy became the morphing poster boy in Terminator 2. The last couple of years has seen digital computer effects become stars in their own right. Would Jurassic Park been half as scary if the dinosaurs weren't created by digital effects? Would Forrest Gump have gotten the chance to interact with all those famous faces if he had been born before the digital age? And would Stargate have been worth entering if digital effects were not available? Probably not. In the next year or two, expect computer-generated effects to take on starring roles in such films as Godzilla, Pinocchio, and Frosty the Snowman. In fact, Hollywood is already kicking around the idea of a film using nothing but computer-generated actors. Hey, wait a second. That reminds me, maybe I better get rid of the computers in the Sci-Fi Buzz production office before one of our smart aleck producers comes up with some goofy idea.
Hey, this is Ross Watson calling from Hot Springs, Arkansas, calling to recommend a comic by Rumiko Takahashi. She's a very famous artist and writer in manga comics. The comic is called Ranma 1/2, and it's a hilariously funny martial arts comedy where the main character changes gender when he's hit with water. You gotta check it out.
He started out writing about science fiction in the 30s, then in the 50s moved into the fantasy world, and even though he didn't create the Conan character, he worked for a long time on Robert E. Howard's Conan stories, editing and adding to the series. Well, now he regularly collaborates with his wife. Ladies and gentlemen, Sprague and Decamp, two of sci-fi and fantasy's finest.
Well, he's a very strange person, and when he's doing his own thing, he's quiet and doesn't want to be interfered with. So I had to learn to run the business and take care of the kids. We have 2 sons when they were growing up, and had to keep him happy and leave him alone much of the time. And then he's just a dear, charming man. But if you get in his hair when he's doing a new book, you might...
Do the two of you ever fight?
Mostly about where commas should be placed in a piece of text that I wrote and she is editing.
How about the golden age of science fiction? What was that like?
We think of it as the copper age because the magazines were paying a cent a word. If you were very good, eventually you could work up to 2 cents a word. In those days, there were only a couple of dozen regular writers in that genre in the United States, and I knew all the main writers of the time. Now, of course, the number has swelled to hundreds, and I can't keep track of them.
Describe Robert Howard for all of us who didn't get to know him.
Well, I never knew him either. As a matter of fact, I didn't become interested in his work even until 1950, when a small New York publisher put out his one-book-length Conan novel, Conan the Conqueror. And when I read that, I was hooked and hunted up all the Howard stuff I could get. Hand in 1936, you see. He liked to think of himself, that is his imaginary persona, was that of the footloose, fearless, reckless, womanizing, hell-raising adventurer. He was just the opposite.
Why did you find Conan so wonderful?
Because Robert was essentially a master storyteller. He had plenty of faults, as the rest of us do, both in his writing and in his person. But that was the one thing he could do superbly well, which is tell a story, especially a fast action adventure type of story.
Now, Catherine, you were involved in the novelization of the Conan movie, but you got no credit.
Oh, no. The woman editor said, "Oh, but I won't have a woman's name on a Conan book." And so Sprague said, "Well, at least can I write up that Catherine did 2/3 of this book?" And she said yes, and then she took it almost all out, but just words like material was added by Catherine Decamp. I've had that. I've been a closet writer. My secretary
so
shocked
Catherine
at that.
made a little waxen image of that lady editor and stuck things in it, and 2 weeks later she got fired.
And no one's ever heard of her since.
Activision attempts to annihilate the competition with the latest version of its video game, Pitfall, after this delightful diversion. If you're a Star Wars video game fan, you'll have to wait until spring for the new Dark Forces video. Too bad, huh? Now, it says here it will be in the style of first-person gaming, and the player will be trying to find the plans for the Death Star. Sounds like fun. Now, I guess there's been a conspiracy on the dark side of the Force because it was originally due out at Christmas time, but LucasArts says you can expect it very, very soon. Now, in the meantime, we have an interesting tale for all you video gamophiles out there. You'll love this. It's Pitfall. 13 years may not be a very long time in the grand scheme of things, but it's an eternity in the world of video games. Back in 1982, Activision released a cartridge game for the Atari 2600 called Pitfall. And though it looks primitive in comparison to today's titles, Pitfall jump-started the video game craze of the 80s. Eventually, over 4 million copies were sold, making it the best-selling video game of all time. This is Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure, a sparkling, updated version of the game that could have as big an effect on the industry as the original Pitfall. And Activision's 31-year-old chairman, Bobby Kotick, seems hungry enough to make that happen.
I'm guessing they probably had 2 people working on the project 10 years ago, well, in 1982, and it probably cost them $60,000. And we had 100 people working on the project, and it cost us $1.5 million.
In an ambitious attempt to conquer the competition, Activision recently moved its headquarters to Southern California. This has provided them with easy access to Hollywood's creative community.
whether it's screenwriters, animators, artists, directors, producers, but we've really added a new dimension to our products that hasn't existed in these products before.
Croyer Films, the animation house behind the feature Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, drew over 3,000 animation cells for Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure. This presented Activision's eager young creative team, headed by John Spinelli, with a unique challenge: how to process the rich, colorful cells into a computer without sacrificing quality.
I think we took a very, very good first step at revolutionizing the industry in terms of enabling these professional animators to do what they do best and for us to maintain that quality of animation.
Another top priority was the sound of the game. The fusion of driving music and crisp, natural sounds has produced an audio track that is light years beyond the simplistic bleeps and blips of the original game.
In designing the game, we went to these incredible lengths to try and get as much reality in the experience as we could. So, for example, we had a digital recording team go to Costa Rica and into the rainforests to actually record over 2,500 separate digital clips of rainforest sounds, which we then incorporated into the game.
In the early 80s, the cartridge system was pretty much the only way to play video games. But with the progress of computer technology, the new Pitfall was designed with a variety of formats in mind.
A lot of adults, 25 and beyond, have PCs at home, but they don't have the console games. They don't have a Sega Genesis or a Super Nintendo plugged into their television, yet they still want a gaming experience that's a little more action-oriented and less cerebral than a puzzle game or an adventure game.
Shoot him, get him.
Activision is currently creating a home version of the popular simulation game BattleTech. When Mech Warrior is released this spring, players will be able to phone up friends via modem and play the game head-to-head. And that's just one of a number of exciting projects on the company's slate.
The obstacles and the challenges that we're facing in creating this new form of entertainment, because it is truly a new form of entertainment, are extraordinary. And I think what you'll find here at our company, our culture, is that it's some of the smartest, sharpest, high bandwidth intellect, ambitious group of people. And that's, to me, what makes it the most satisfying.
When we recharge, commentator Harlan Ellison sounds off. And commentator on the passing scene is award-winning author Harlan Ellison. When we call him award-winning, that's an understatement. Harlan has won more awards for his 62 books, more than 1,700 stories, articles, essays, and columns than any other living fantasist. His current books are Minefields, Mephisto and Onyx, and I, Robot Screenplay, based on concepts by Isaac Asimov.
I go where the action is when we do these commentaries. And it keeps going back to the internet, keeps going back to these computer bulletin boards. Keep getting the flame wars of things that I'm alleged to have said. A couple of weeks ago, it wasn't all that well edited. It was one of the few that Dick Crew didn't edit well, but he does very, very well. But this one, the one I was talking about, conventions, instead of it being a lament for small conventions and meeting people like Edward E. Smith, Doc Smith, and Hugo Gernsback and things like that, and saying the big conventions are now too big and they mostly serve publishers. It turned out that people all of a sudden on the internet were screaming that I was saying that one of the conventions, the WesterCon, had made so much money that they were able to give money to other people, and on and on. It was the usual blabber and babble that you hear on the internet. And so they didn't really get the message of what I had been saying, but it went all over the internet. And then there was another one. The internet got crazy and decided that the great author William Kotzwinkle had not gone to the World Fantasy Convention in New Orleans because I had told him that if I wasn't made the Toastmaster, that I would stop him from going. Well, that's just too loony even to talk about. But I decided that I was going to do a little something about the computer nets this time, and I was going to use not just my comments, but the comments of one of the net gurus, Bruce Sterling. Now, Bruce Sterling is the author of The Hacker Crackdown, among other books, Islands in the Net, Global Head, Schismatrix. I published Involution Ocean. His new book is called Heavy Weather, and he is really a heavy-duty internet guy. And what he says about the nets in his column Cat Scan, which is from a magazine called Science Fiction Eye, is very, very interesting. Electronic text lacks the ritual, sensual elements of print publication: back covers, front covers, typography, italics, convenient stopping places, an impending sense of completion, what one might call the body language of the printed text. The loss of these sensory clues has subtle but profound effects on one's dealing with the text. What he's saying here is that the bulletin board, on which many of you spend most of your nights, is not really the equivalent of a book, that you're not going to get the same sensory load. He also says the letter columns everywhere, the reader-written e-zines, tend to attract monomaniacs with an axe to grind. We have all these people who stand on there and diss each other endlessly. This is one of your own. This is one of your gurus. It's not me babbling at you. This is one of your own high gurus talking. And he says, I've gotten quite a lot of email that by all rights should have been written in crayon by a person whom a kindly society had deprived of sharp objects. It can often take several exchanges of email to bring forth a realization that would have taken perhaps 7 seconds of contact in real life. This person is unhinged. These are all problems that one gets with the computer bulletin boards. I think you should talk among yourselves. And in fact, when he talks about science fiction, he says the net is not really concerned about talking about science fiction. What he says is the net is interested only in the net. Net spiders are, in that sense, much like the ham radio people who bounce signals off the ionosphere all the way to Madagascar so as to ask, well, what kind of ham shack you got? What kind of bulletin board you got? I rest my case. It's not me.
Oh no, look at this. The bulletin boards are already starting to buzz. Not in a good way either, folks. We're in trouble again, Harlan. Hey, don't blame us. Harlan's the bad guy here. Most of us really are nice folks. We would never do anything to make our viewers mad. No way, I'm telling you. But a couple of things I should respond to. Some of you say, we don't like it on Sci-Fi Buzz when you do reruns, but every now and then we have to do that. And some of you say the cameraman, Piers Bath, he's too tipsy. He moves the camera around too much. Now, Piers says, ooh, it's that new video style. I think he is tipsy. But he's going to try to improve by next week. We'll see you again next week for Sci-Fi Buzz. Oh, that's really good. Oh, boy.
The mysteries of aliens, the magic of Houdini, the miracles of angels. Now the real stories, people, and events are explained in a thrilling new series, Mysteries, Magic, and Miracles, hosted by Patrick McNee. Coming up next.